I am the very model of a singularitarian. I'm combination transhuman and modalist extropian. Aggressively, I'm changing all my body's biochemistry because my body's heritage is obsolete genetically.
I was interested in life extension from when I was a little kid. Should I freeze myself, or should I live forever? This country has a duopoly that kind of controls the system.
Hi, I'm Greg Mustreader, and this is my podcast on rationality, transhumanism, biohacking, and trends of development in society. Today, here with me is the US Transhumanist Party candidate in 2020 presidential elections, an entrepreneur and an artist, Charlie Kemp. Hi, Charlie.
Hi, Greg. How are you? This is what we do. A true futurist is always going to greet you this way, especially during this time of this COVID crisis. This is very where you don't touch the person, but you let them know to live long and prosper.
You're the Star Trek guy or the Star Wars guy?
Oh, Star Trek, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, but actually, I probably neither one. Now that I'm a grown adult, I look at both of them. I think, oh yeah, they made all sorts of technological mistakes.
Yeah, but how could they know in advance all those marvels?
You know what? Well, there were other people that knew. Richard Feynman, for example. You know who he was.
He's a legend, of course.
Right, he's a legend. Anybody that's in the world of transhumanism or futuristic technologies knows about him. Anyway, it's not that he necessarily knew, but there were a lot of people that were visionaries, and one of them, of course, is my hero Ray Kurzweil, that I've read all his books, and that opening song that you played, the video, is obviously dedicated to his book.
Yeah, singularity is near.
Yes, the singularity is near. I was already a fan of Ray Kurzweil's from the 90s when he wrote The Age of the Intelligent Machine back in 1990, and then, of course, Age of the Spiritual Machine in 2000. So when I found out that he was coming out with another book, The Singularity is Near, in 2005, I ordered an early edition as soon as it was going to come out. I sent extra money to get one because I really was excited. And when I finally got that book, I mean, I literally probably read it in one evening. When you're passionate about something, you just go crazy. And I basically read that overnight or within a day or so. And it's 600 pages and it gets a little technical. But when I read it, I thought, wow, this is the most profound book I ever read, and it really needs to be known by the world. Everybody should understand what's coming. But I know a lot of people, friends and people that I know, that would probably not sit and read 600 pages. So I thought, I have a background in science, but I also have a background in music. So I thought, why not, turn it into a song? So that's kind of what I did.
Yeah, it's a great song, and for everyone interested, we'll give links to the full version in the description of this video version of the podcast or audio version of the podcast on podcasting platforms. I really admire how you can turn a little bit boring scientific stuff into these hilarious songs and parodies. I think that's something that the transhumanist movement lacks. I'm glad that you are now the candidate in the elections. But the question I have to ask the question of the background of this decision, because I know that previously you used to be the running mate of Ben Zion in these elections, and you used to be running for vice president, but Ben Zion has grown, if I'm not mistaken, in a lab, meat from his own cells, and has eaten a burger with human flesh in it, something like that. That's why he got kicked out of the the party. Is that the correct version of the events?
No, it's not it's not the correct version. You got some parts in there, but let me clarify just to say what happened. They had a primary, and a bunch of people ran. I was not one of them at the time. And Ben got elected. He's a very knowledgeable guy about the whole movement. I mean, if you talk to him, he really knows his stuff. And And I was actually helping him to try to win. I was giving him pointers or whatever because I believed in the way he spoke about everything that he stood for. And once he won the nomination, he came to me and asked me if I would be his running mate. I've got things that I'm doing all the time, but I said, yeah, sure. I mean, I believe in the cause, and my whole adult life, I've been pushing the idea of trying to spread the idea of transhumanism and all of what it stands for. So I was happy to be a part of it. After a few months, basically, he just had disagreements with the chairperson of the party. Mm-hmm. This idea of the burger thing that he did, nobody really in the USTP wanted him to do it because they thought it sounds a little, off-putting, to say the least. But
for most people, at least.
Well, but here's what it really came down to, because he had brought it up once or twice to me, and I said, I don't. I mean, but the real reason that it was because, don't forget, when Zoltan Istvan ran in 2016, mm-hmm. He got the coffin bus, right? He designed a bus like a coffin and drove around, and that was really the point of that was to a publicity stunt, essentially, to get attention, to bring attention to the movement, so people would come and say, right, and it worked. I mean, it was brilliant. I don't know if you've seen the documentary that he released recently, but it was a really good documentary. It really brought home all the values we stand for. It showed him as a nice family fellow who had a lot of knowledge about it. And it was poignant. It showed about the passing of his father. So it really was a well done documentary, and I wish it could have came out sooner. But in any case, and from my understanding, Ben was just looking for a way to do a publicity stunt, and he didn't do that burger thing until after he left the party. So he wasn't really kicked out because he did that. That was just something he was thinking about as, I believe, a way to attract attention. And because Ben's not a cannibal. He's a regular guy. He just, thought that would be an attention. Look, Ben's a friend of mine. He'll never be not my friend. I like him. We get along, and he's a smart, he's got a great sense of humor. Maybe that's part of it too. He was in disagreement with the vision that Gennady might have had and that what he has. And again, if not for Ben, I wouldn't even be running, because he selected me, asked me to be his running mate. And I'm happy to be doing this now, really. He did that in part because he was looking to maybe be a candidate for other parties in the idea of bringing transhumanist ideas to those parties, like the Reform Party or something like that. So I wish him well. And it's unfortunate that it all played out the way it did, but it is what it is, and I'm happy to carry the torch. And we've had conversations since this, and just not long ago, and he's happy to see that I'm doing what I'm doing with it. We're all trying to move the whole transhumanist idea forward.
I see. Gennady is the leader of the Transhumanist Party, right?
Gennady Stolarov is the chairperson of the Transhumanist Party. I mean, he would be a good person to run, but he part of the requirement to run for president, you have to be born in the United States. Mm-hmm, so technically that eliminates him, and Arnold Schwarzenegger cannot run for the United States Transhumanist Party for that matter. But he's a great guy. He's another friend. It's funny that I know they don't agree on things, but they're both good friends of mine.
It's interesting that, as far as I know, the official version of the party is that they kicked Ben out because of that incident. On my part, just to clarify, I don't think that it's cannibalism. If he ate cells produced in a lab, he didn't eat a person. I think it's a revolutionary technology, by the way. I think in future this will be definitely used to grow not human meat, probably.
Right.
Artificial meat.
Absolutely. Artificial meat is going to be a multi-billion-dollar industry. In fact, there was just an announcement the other day that Kentucky Fried Chicken is trying to grow laboratory meat for their chicken nuggets. Because obviously I knew was coming for a long time. A lot of people knew, but I personally had gone to an incubator in Silicon Valley with all these young entrepreneurs who were developing artificial pork, artificial beef, artificial chicken, artificial fish, all from cells. It's just logical. Think about it. Artificial meat made in laboratories won't have any contamination. I mean, those are sterile laboratories. Plus, if you want, you can actually manipulate it so that it wouldn't even have saturated fats. You could have the omega-3 oils. There's all sorts of benefits to doing that, not to mention, of course, the environmental factor, because you're talking about eliminating all the factory farms, not to mention the cruelty to all the animals.
Yeah.
So it has so many benefits that it's inevitable it's coming. And by the way, it wasn't that long ago the first laboratory hamburger was made, and I think it cost about $300,000 or something dollars. About a year or so they brought it down to about $11 for that same size. Just like everything.
I ate one. It's quite tasty, by the way.
You ate a laboratory burger?
I ate an Impossible Burger. Is that?
Oh, well, that's different
thing?
though. No. Look, Impossible Burgers are made from vegetables. Those are vegan. That's vegan meat.
I didn't know.
There's a distinct difference. Although Impossible Burgers are the bridge to artificial meat burgers. So, because a lot of people were skeptical as to whether or not the artificial meat burgers would be accepted by society, it's just a matter of marketing. You can make anything palatable. But the thing is that it was a great bridge, and that became a $1 billion industry. Impossible Burger, Beyond Burgers, they flooded the market, and they did get picked up by Burger King, and they're pretty good. And but that is not the same as animal cells being built in the laboratories. So the good thing about the animal meat thing is it'll solve the problem for the people that maybe they don't want to be vegan, but they like meat burgers. Well, now we can make it, healthy, and we don't. And all the animals that are being tortured are no longer tortured. That, to me, that's really the best part of it. I really hate to see any kind of sentient beings being put in harm's way or tortured. I can't even step on a ant or spiders. So I just.
For me as well, I have cut down on my meat consumption, and I'm planning on becoming probably pescatarian at least. Because I've read a lot about those horrible industries, so that's something that really is promising. Okay, let's discuss the marketing of the Transhumanist Party then. I know that you have been partially responsible for it for some recent period of time, right?
Responsible for what?
For the marketing of the Transhumanist Party.
Oh well, yeah. Now that I'm running for the president, I've been getting invited for interviews, and I did one in the UK, and I did two actually there, and then we do a Zoom meeting, a salon I should call it, with the officers of the party, where it's led by Gennady, the chairman of the party, and myself as one of the main interviewers. So we're trying to market it in just trying to grow numbers of the members by bringing in interesting guests. In our pre-talk, I mentioned to you that we had David Hansen just yesterday as one of our guests. David Hansen, of course, is the founder of Hansen Robotics that created Sophia the robot. And, Sophia was declared a person in the UAE.
Yeah, they gave her ID, I think.
Yeah, she's actually considered a citizen now. So having those kind of interesting people on, brings more attention to the party. So we're trying to market it as best we can. Of course, I'm running for president, but the truth is that it's obviously quite an uphill battle to try to win in the United States, where we have a crazy duopoly. So it's not like I expect to win, to be realistic. But the goal really is to push the ideas of transhumanism as much as possible, much like the Green Party did with global warming or climate change. They helped push that along, obviously, with Greta Thunberg too. But because that became so prominent in the society or in the world zeitgeist, that now all the candidates that were on stage for this particular presidential primary in the Democratic Party all had to address the idea of, what are you going to do about climate change? That became an important aspect. So what we would like to do for the Transhumanist Party is push the ideas that are important to us. For me in particular, it would be life extension as the focus, really, as the primary focus of the transhumanist movement.
So you want the population to ask any candidate from any party, what's your stance on life extension, right?
I would like them. Because the interesting thing is, it's amazing, but the timing of what's going on too with this COVID crisis really brings it to the forefront. Prior to COVID, I would say, the economy and climate change and healthcare were all important, but now not only are they important, but less people are talking about climate. And that's unfortunate because I think that's very important. But what they're really focused on now, obviously, is healthcare, because so many people are getting infected by COVID, so many people are dying from COVID, and a lot of people are losing their jobs because of COVID, which ties right into our economy, which then ties into the idea of what are they going to do for paychecks, which ties into the idea of universal basic income, which also became a little bit of a talking point in our recent primaries for the Democratic Party. But now it's gotten really much more popular as an idea. In fact, a lot of people are saying that Andrew Yang, who was running as a Democratic nominee, was probably about 6 months ahead of his time, because a lot of people are talking about this in a very strong way, that it's almost necessary. In fact, they've already sent out some government checks for people that are out of work in this country, because not only because of this crisis, but the inevitability of automation, which is taking over a lot of jobs.
So this looks like a test drive of a universal basic income checks sent to everyone. Well, and you think it's inevitable?
As I said, I'm a big proponent of Ray Kurzweil. And so when you think about the trajectory that he describes in Singularity is Near, and the way we're approaching the singularity, and all of what comes of the doubling of information and computational technology, we can see that automation is going to take over almost all the jobs, eventually all of our jobs, but it'll take over a majority of the jobs, so that there just won't be enough jobs to go around. There'll still be some jobs, but there would never be enough to compensate for all the population that grows. Also, you have to not take any of these separately. We have to look at the different things that are going to occur, which means mass production. The economy of abundance, as it's described. We're going to have things like what's already happening, 3D printing, for example, and eventually molecular manufacturing devices. So we will have, similar to what you saw in Star Trek, replicators, where we'll just have mass production of everything in people's homes. So when we have an economy of abundance where everybody's getting everything they want, as far as the 3D printers and the molecular manufacturing devices, it'll be inevitable that we'll have to set up some form of UBI, because they won't have the jobs.
Yeah, so what will those people do? Just play video games and print items for their consumption?
Well, no, I think what's going to happen is, like you said, this COVID situation has been a little bit of a preview as to what's to come. Personally, as well as everybody I talk to, they don't like the idea of just sitting around with nothing to do or being cooped up. And they are looking for things. And I've noticed that people are turning more and more to the internet, to learn things or to do things, because the idea that we're going to be slovenly or just do nothing is because, in part, for the longest time, because of capitalism, humanity, particularly in the West, has defined itself by its job. By when you ask somebody, or when you meet somebody in this country, you say, well, hey, how you doing? Almost one of the first questions is, what do you do? What do you do? That's kind of that's how they define themselves. Like, oh, I'm a fireman, or I'm a bank executive. That is unfortunate, because there's so much more to humanity than just doing a job. And I think, ironically, people are afraid that automation is going to make them lose their job, and I understand why, because, we grew up with the idea that you have to get a job to make the money to put food on the table. But imagine with mass production and an abundance economy where you have everything you need, you don't have to be defined by that. And I think younger generations will start to adapt to that. And so, in answer to your question, I think what will happen is you'll see a flourish of creativity, of people creating ideas and jobs. And look how many people now have podcasts, because the technology is there, right? I mean, I just see this stuff happening all the time. I don't think it's going to be where people are just doing nothing and they're not, making good use of their time. I think you're going to see an excitement of things. Now, there is one other aspect that should be mentioned here, because it's already in its nascent stage. Elon Musk, everybody loves Elon, right? Elon Musk has come out with the company Neuralink, and he's already trying to do an interface for the brain. So imagine that pretty soon people are going to be a lot smarter than they were not that long ago. And that's probably going to happen in this decade. So as we see people not only have more time, but they're going to be possibly thousands of times smarter, which means you're going to have an explosion of brilliance and time. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to see what that's going to bring. I really don't see this as a detriment. I see this as a big boon, or rather a big promise to make society much better.
Me too, although I'm a bit concerned that I don't have the time to listen to all the podcasts in the world. I've seen a joke, a millennial in his or her life should do the following things: launch their own podcast, set up and dissolve a startup, and experience burnout. So I've done 3 of those, so I'm in. Okay, we started discussing the party and the elections. Obviously, you said you don't have significant chances against the 2 major candidates, but still, how many votes do you expect to get based on previous results of the party?
Relatively minuscule. I really don't expect anything of any real significance. It would be hard for me to guess that. I don't know.
But the order of magnitude.
Let's say, for example, a lot of the Transhumanist Party people vote. It could be in the thousands, but I really have no idea. And the reason I really don't know, and I'm being honest, because I don't really expect to win, because it's just impossible. Not because our ideas are bad. It's really because this country has a duopoly that kind of controls the system, and it makes it very, very hard for a third party of any caliber to even scratch the surface of getting counted in the election. For example, probably the third biggest party in the United States is the Libertarian Party. They never get any sizable amount. Even if they try to get on the ballots, it costs a lot of money. You have to get a lot of signatures. The 2 parties that run the country essentially are the Republicans and Democrats, and they made it very, very hard for other parties to try to even get in there. For example, even the Green Party, a lot of people were excited about them in the last election in 2016 because of the attention brought to the climate change movement. Yet they could barely get on any ballots, and it was a struggle. And, if you want to look at it this way, with regard to this duopoly and why it's really outdated and it needs to be replaced, then we do need to have a different system. Because if you look at the last 2 most energizing candidates, or rather the most energizing candidate of each of the parties, Donald Trump, who got the nomination, obviously, wasn't even a registered Republican. He was a game show host from The Apprentice. I mean, he just came in and says, I'm going to change, I'm going to do things different. And everybody gravitated towards him that was a Republican or wanted to vote for him because they wanted to see a change. And on the other side of the spectrum with the Democrats, Bernie Sanders was the most popular energizing force of that party. And he wasn't officially a Democrat. He was of the Independent Party. And then he switched over to the Democrats, and he called himself a Democratic Socialist. Yeah. So, that duopoly, unfortunately, sits there, and people that are from other parties kind of have to join those parties just to get their voices heard. I think that's kind of the case with Andrew Yang. I think Andrew Yang might fall more into our party, based on the fact that he thinks a lot about how automation is going to change the dynamics of our economy. And that was kind of the forefront of what he was all about.
Yeah, looks so. But I think in history, in the 20th century, there used to be cases when the independents won something close to 10%. Am I right?
Yeah. I mean, there were situations like Ross Perot back in the 80s, and when he ran against Clinton. The problem, of course, there was too, again, which we almost saw here with Michael Bloomberg, was it required a billionaire. I mean, in a capitalist world, I guess you could just buy your way if you have to. But even then, it's They made it the duopoly made it very, very, very hard to get on the ballots. And they kind of work in tandem with the networks, and it's tough, to get a third party to even be on a stage. So it's happened where third parties have gotten some traction, but rarely, do they even come close to being significant. They maybe the only thing they can do essentially is be somewhat of a spoiler. They're not going to win. But, arguably, Ralph Nader, people say that he may have spoiled the election for Al Gore back in 2000 because he took away some votes in Florida. But, when he was running as an independent or a third party. But for the most part, it's just unfortunate that that's the case. And I think that's going to change over time. But
wouldn't it make the more logical approach for transhumanists to enter not the USTP, the Transhumanist Party, but, for example, the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, and try to raise through the ranks of that parties to become candidates of that parties?
Yeah, no, I think that's what Zoltan was trying to do. Zoltan Istvan, when he essentially left the USTP, even though he's one of the founders, but he left, and this year he was trying to run to get on the Libertarian ticket. And then he was contemplating, he was on the Republican ticket. He was trying to get on the Libertarian ticket, but he did register under those bigger parties to see if he could possibly make some kind of dent in that and see if he can get on stage. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But it doesn't negate that we shouldn't have the USTP. I think we have, it's just like what I said with regard to Bernie Sanders, for example. He was with the Independent Party, but then he because he wanted to run for president, switched to Democratic Party, and then he ran, and then he switched back when he didn't win the first time with Hillary or against Hillary. So now, he tried to run again as a Democrat. So I think that you're right. It would be a good idea, and I do think that's what Zoltan tried to do. So yeah, but I do think we could have a party. I think the USDP should be a party, like I said earlier, where you can kind of represent the belief systems of what we have, much like the Green Party does for the environment.
How soon do you think it possible for a transhumanist to become the president of the United States?
Oh, I think it's going to be very soon. Elon Musk is a transhumanist. He just, doesn't call himself that. But by definition, here's a guy who's doing all of these innovative technologies, particularly, I think, Neuralink. So, we might have a transhumanist in office who may not know that he's that we call him that. I think the ideas of transhumanism, as we discussed earlier, are going to come anyway. I mean, like I said, the economy of abundance is coming. It's funny that there's a debate about whether universal basic income is a socialist idea or is it a capitalist, some form of It really, however you want to define it, it's going to come. It's kind of like, Kurzweil's idea of exponential growth of technology. And some people are debating about, well, should we allow that? Well, it's not a matter of allowing it. It's a matter of when. It's just going to come. So we should learn about it and deal with it as best we can. And I think that's going to happen. We're going to have an automated technology that's going to pervade throughout all of society. So when you think about it, all of our economy, Keynesian economists, people that understand that, know that economy is basically started with evolution, right? It was survival of the fittest, and it was a limited, it was based on supply and demand. So you had only so much resources, and that's how economies in capitalism are determined. That you have only so much supply, and thus demand goes up. But when you have unlimited supply, well, that's going to undermine the whole idea of capitalism. The economy is going to necessarily change, and we're going to have what's called the economy of abundance. That's only going to be good. That means that once it spreads worldwide, and it will, then you won't have poverty in places that have been stricken with poverty for a long, long time, not to mention in our own countries.
You mentioned that there are notable people who are, in fact, transhumanists, but do not call themselves transhumanists. And I think it may be because for some people, this word is connected with some negative connotations. Is that correct?
It's one of those words where people don't even know what it means sometimes. When I first started talking about transhumanism, look, I was interested in life extension from when I was a little kid. I mean, I'm not a religious person for the most part. When I was growing up, I was very much in science and technology. And if somebody asked me how you got here, I'd say, well, there was Big Bang, there was evolution, and here I am. And then if they want to know where I'm going, I'm like, death and non-existence, which became pretty, to say the least, it gave a lot of apprehension to me. And the idea was I started looking into just exactly what could be done as far as not dying. And that's when I started to look into things that involved that, which included things like cryonics and stuff. But then I found out that there was such an organization as the World Transhumanist Association, that there was this whole group of like-minded people, but they were called transhumanists. And I had to learn what that meant. And I saw, okay, transhumanism basically means you're transcending the human dilemma of dying. And they do it through the use of technology. So that made a lot of sense to me. But there was a lot of apprehension way back then in the late 90s about that term. Because even when I would tell people that I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm into transhumanism. Well, of course, the first thing they thought was like, oh, really? So you don't want to be a man anymore. You're going to become a woman. I'm like, no, no, it's not that. They thought it was transgender or something of that nature because it sounds close. So there was a misunderstanding of it. With the speed of social media and the exponential growth of technologies, the definitions of terms are becoming more and more exposed and better well-defined in society. For example, because there was confusion about transhumanism with transgender, it had to be explained every time when I would meet someone and I'd tell them what transhumanism was. But now, transgender has become clearly defined. People know what that is. So that isn't necessary. Like now, because you've got people like Bruce Jenner, he's transgender now, and he's a woman, whatever his new name is, Jenner. And there are some transgender models Caitlyn Jenner. And there's some transgender models that are sought after highly on the runways in Europe. They're easily accepted. There's some television stars and TV and movie stars that are transgender. Now that group of people and that term has been well defined. So by default, people know, well, transhumanism is not that because that's got its own name.
But I meant a different connotation. Most people that I speak to know of transhumanism, and I'm in a bubble. Obviously, most people in the world don't know about it, but most people I speak to know of it and know that it's not connected to being a trans person. But they say that transhumanism is something about becoming a robot. That's the connotation they have. And many people react negatively towards that. They don't think immediately of life extension and all those obviously good things. They think about cutting off your hands and legs, installing prostheses, becoming a Terminator,
Oh, yeah. No, look, you're right. And the problem, of course, is just marketing. It's just a matter of getting the word out there. That's part of what my job is right now and what my job has been a long time. But it's really just getting people to be aware of what it stands for so they don't just think automatically bad things. I'll give you an example of something recently that happened. There was an interview by a famous actress, Katie Sackhoff or something like that. I think that's her name. You can Google it. But she was on Battlestar Galactica. And she's been in a lot of TV shows. She was on The Big Bang Theory. She does a YouTube TV show, podcast or YouTube channel. She has a YouTube channel where she does these different interviews about different things. And she recently went and interviewed Alcor, the cryonics suspension company in the United States in Arizona. Yeah. She went there. The title of her YouTube video for that was, Should I freeze myself? Or it was, Should I live forever? And she went there and she interviewed Max Moore, who's the ambassador for he used to be president, or now he's the ambassador. He was the CEO, now he's the ambassador for Alcor. And it was a lengthy 45-minute interview. And she went into it admitting that she says, look, my idea of what cryonics was and what it what I have, the idea of what it is now that I came out of it after that interview and going there is totally different. She says, I had different, I didn't even know, she didn't even know that it was necessarily possible. She thought it was just science fiction.
By the way,
most people do think it's still, and they still think it's science fiction, even though it's been in all sorts of movies, cryonics. That just gives you a very, that's like a little microcosm example, showing that someone goes into something thinking, something futuristic, for example, which, by the way, transhumanism is a big proponent of cryonics. So they go into it thinking one thing or being unaware, and then once they understand it, then they don't have that negative or misconstrued connotation. But look, basically, the reason I think transhumanism, once it does get more exposure, it'll catch on because it is only a positive thing. I mean, look, the idea of life extension, really, what we're talking about is adopting technologies and therapies that will keep people alive. Who would not want to see their grandparents or their terminally ill child kept alive? I mean, that's our goal. So once they understand that, I think we're going to be looked at in a very positive light.
Yeah, that's the job of those in charge of marketing transhumanism. I consider myself, by the way, one of those people because I advocate in my blogs for that.
You need to get on that. Work harder.
Yeah, I know. I'm pushing myself. My last question would be, what are the 3 most important steps that you would take should you become the president? Imagine that for some reason you succeed. Other candidates
let me imagine that for a second.
Disappear and you succeed.
Yeah, okay, I'm president. No, here's what I would say. Well, I mean, the first step I would have to tell you is that I would definitely surround myself with the smartest people I can think of, particularly in the transhumanist community. So I'd be calling up Ray Kurzweil and probably Aubrey de Grey and Ben Goertzel and all these brilliant people that are part of this movement, because we need that kind of brain power in the leadership. I mean, right now we have a leader who, when he's dealing with this COVID crisis, he's saying things like, injecting people with cleaner, so that's craziness, right? So obviously we need smartness. So that would be one of the first things I would do. The other thing I would say, I would want to, look over the economy, and we have to restructure it so that we're not spending more than half of our entire economy on the defense. We spend more on defense than all the other top countries in the westernized society combined. There's no reason for that. So we need to take that kind of money and put it towards life extension research in particular. So I would really see, I would redistribute all of that type of the budget into things that are going to be much more life extending. Those are some of the things I would do. And that would probably incorporate a lot of steps. So you're asking me the top 3. I mean, bringing in smart people, redistributing the budget. I would like to see, maybe more information to people to learn more about all the technologies that are out there. One of the things I think that's important is education. And I would like to see, like, for example, we were talking about universal basic income. Of course, I would be pushing for that. Now, there's been a debate about whether or not that's affordable. Well, the idea of pushing that kind of money towards people, I mean, they would spend it, it would get back into the economy anyway, but I would supplement it with things like 3D printers or eventually molecular manufacturing devices. So that would offset it, where you don't have to just give money. It would be a way of people getting the things they need. The other thing that's important would be a form of universal basic health for everyone. But I would want to do it in a way that's more proactionary or preventative, because we have so many technologies. For example, aging. That's something that I would do. I would want to put aging as a disease so that people can focus on making aging something that we go to cure. Because if we can stop all the forms of aging, well, then the cost of healthcare would plummet. And I would also look for free education. People debate whether or not that's something we can afford. I would argue the opposite. I would say it's something we can't afford not to do. We need to have people smarter. We can't have people that don't understand, what it is to put a guy in office that doesn't know what he's doing. So we have to have a smarter electorate. And I think that by having free public education for everybody, not just through grade school and high school, but for college. And that, again, the cost for that can be offset by putting a lot of that online and perfecting it. And I think this COVID thing has really accelerated that idea. So this COVID kind of did bring a lot of things to the forefront. But anyway, I apologize for going on and on with your last question there. But now that I'm a politician, I'm long-winded.
It's okay. I like your way of thinking. I hope you will be successful, even though you say that the chances are low. Maybe not in this election cycle. Maybe in some of the next ones.
I just want to say I would like to see you run for president of Russia. When are you going to do that?
We will see. We will see. At the moment, I'm in between countries. Currently, due to lockdown, I'm in Moscow, but I'm spending part of my time in Russia, part in the US, and in other countries, producing content in several languages.
Well, so, I think if I was president of the US and you were president of Russia, it would be a much better alliance than Trump and Putin. I'll tell you that right now. So.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Charlie. For the viewers and listeners, please support my projects on Patreon. The link will be in the description of this video and the audio version of the podcast. Hit the like button, the subscribe button, write a review on iTunes, Spotify, or any other podcasting platforms that you use. Thank you for listening and watching. See you next week. I'm Greg Mustreader. Thank you, Charlie.
You're welcome.